of Fire thing just opened this floodgate of material that I got exposed to. That I was just like, yes, please give me more of that. But I still am not a fan of the first two albums. I don't know. When it comes to the neoclassical thing, I'd rather listen to Yngwie do that or Joe Stump. I don't like George Bellis. Is it George Bellis or Joy Bellis?
No, George.
I don't like him either.
And see, I differ from Peter. We had this conversation recently.
Yeah.
I have one of George's albums. I can't even remember which. Okay, let's just give this disclaimer. I have so many CDs. I hardly know what the hell I have anymore. So, but this one George Bellis, this one George Bellis CD, really good. And one thing, there was some George Bellis thing I saw on YouTube where he was playing just like in a room or like a classroom setting or something, and his tone is so clean but distorted. I'm like, how the hell is he shredding like this? I couldn't believe it. It was like the cleanest shred guitar tone I've ever heard. That made me, when I saw this album used at BB's, I scooped it right up. I said, oh yeah, George Bellis, that guy's pretty great.
And just for the record, that is nothing new for me and Chuck to not like the same guitar player, because we've probably got a laundry list of guitar players that neither one of us likes that the other one does. Like, what's his name? The guy that plays ambidextrously on...
Michael Badio.
Yeah.
Michelangelo Badio.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I can't.
Incredible.
I can't. I tried. I watch his YouTube videos, and I have some of this stuff on my hard drive, but it's like, I can't.
Like the first time I heard Yngwie, I was on board. I dug it, and I was probably 12 years old when I heard Marching Out for the first time, and it was like, wow, this is incredible. And of course, it follows that I like the first two McAlpin albums. I like his stuff pretty much all through his career, but I don't think you can make it'd be hard to make an argument that he wasn't kind of aping Malmsteen on those first albums.
Well, here's the thing. I have some inside information. Somebody I knew, like a friend, I didn't know the actual person, but knew it was the person that used to take lessons with Tony when he was teaching in Springfield, Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Oh, here, listen to this." And it was Yngwie. He's like, "Oh, wow. That's pretty interesting." But Tony was already...
Well, he was a classically trained pianist already.
And he was already doing the classical thing on guitar.
He was like a kid prodigy on piano.
On guitar, he was already forming his style. And same thing with Benny Moore. And Yngwie just happened to get signed first.
It's the whole thing of it's the whole Eddie Van Halen argument all over again. It's not necessarily that Yngwie was the first guy to come up with it, but he was the first guy he was the first one out the gate. So whoever gets on the record first back in them days, that's the guy that gets the door because you got no internet.
It was a total frenzy too. Mm-hmm. Look, I saw Yngwie twice in '85. First, Billy Sheehan's band Talus opened up for him. The second time I saw him, Yngwie played with Loudness, and Loudness actually closed the show. They were the headliner. I don't know if they were switching or what they were doing back then, or how the package worked. But I was as close to the front as I could be. Both of them shows. Every way that Yngwie went to the side of the stage, look at the stage. It's going this way. The whole crowd went this way. Mm-hmm. The whole crowd, it was like a sea was taking you away. Then it would go this way. Wherever Yngwie went, the whole crowd went. It was a total frenzy.
Yeah.
And I was going to say one thing. Another thing, like, I could have been the first one. Jimmy Bell, who plays for House of Lords now, that we both like.
Right, yeah.
Me and my best friend, Harry Carson, Weezer, we were going to music school at the time in Hartford, Connecticut. We'd go see Jimmy's band, Joint Voices, all the time. We'd go to this place, Weathersfield Music. The guitar tech was Blue Saraceno, and Jimmy Bell was the guitar teacher. So one day, Harry's playing through, I'm just sitting there watching him play. Harry's playing through some Mesa Boogie combo. I don't even know what it was at the time. But this is like 86, 87. So Jimmy comes out and he's talking to us. And okay, let me just tell you, Jimmy Bell is one of the greatest shredders on the planet of all time. I'm going to say that right now. And he's a lefty.
Yes,
I've seen him take, he did this day. So Jimmy Bell did this day. took the guitar Harry was playing, righty guitar, flipped it, started tapping it lefty. He could do this with any righty guitar, tap out of it. I'm sure I've seen him do it with picking too, but I know it's probably very easy for him to flip it and tap it because of his tapping skills. But when Harry was playing, Harry's playing typical, like, we're big Yngwie heads then, playing neoclassical Yngwie type licks. Jimmy looks to the ground and goes, I could have been the first Yngwie. We're like, dude, we know, you know us, we're at your shows, we're the biggest bellheads and fanatics, I said, we know, so what we're starting for, everybody's out there at this time, Vinnie Moore, McAlpine, Jimmy Bell, who was unsigned then,
right.
like them, just trying to get their name out there, and Yngwie happened to be the first one that got signed, and even, we didn't even talk about this, David T. Chastain was supposed to get recorded, and Mike Varney got the Yngwie demo and said, let me record this Swedish kid, and then I'll do you next. Because, Mike and David T. Chastain's a great player. He's another really bizarre player like Marty Friedman. Mm-hmm. He has his own thing. It's just, the way he does stuff is just really different. Yeah. And, and Yngwie got signed and was off and running,
I am a huge fan of Vinnie Moore. You did happen to mention him. I think I was a bigger fan. I think back during like Mind's Eye and
Meltdown.
I think back then I was probably a bigger Vinnie Moore fan than I was an Yngwie fan. If we're talking about the actual playing, and I always liked Yngwie's tone better. But
when Mind's Eye came out, we were like, oh my god.
Yeah.
That's probably still my favorite Vinnie album because it was so groundbreaking for him, his first album, and his acoustic stuff on that. You could tell how much he loved Al Di Meola, and of course we know that after the fact too. And and Al even gave him props in an interview that I read. And I'm trying to think what else. When Meltdown came out, right? Me and Harry were working at this place called CD One Stop, and I got it as a promo cassette because we could get free stuff all the time, when they're getting rid of stuff, whatever. So, got this promo cassette, and I liked it, and it was great, but I didn't like when he changed to that bluesy style. Mm-hmm. I liked how Vinnie had always been recording his neoclassical type of infusion-y type of stuff. But now I have such a greater appreciation for that album. The tunes are so memorable, they're hummable, it's great.
I guess
much like another Shrapnel guy that came out, Michael Lee Firkins. It's like, wow, this guy is a breath of fresh air.
I was never a big fan of Firkins, but he was a monster player though. I gotta take away from that. I guess as far as influential guitarists go, my secondary choice would be probably someone that most of y'all probably wouldn't expect. Because, like you start talking about influential guitarists, just the names everyone throws around is just, Al Di Meola, Alan Holdsworth, Sean Lane. But I think for me, I really, to me, I felt that his first 4 albums in his band, they weren't solo albums. It was all full band work. But I think his first 4 albums were just very groundbreaking when they came out, and that has to be Ty Tabor from King's X. You start looking at. They're not shred albums by any stretch of the imagination, but when you go back and you listen to the songwriting and the guitar playing on Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, Out of the Silent Planet, Faith, Love, Hope, the self-titled King's X album, it's just phenomenal playing, phenomenal sense of melody. That's with the vocals and with the music, and it was so different than everything else that was out at the time that it just kind of stood out. And they were that band, even though they didn't really ever get, the over-the-top commercial success, they were that band that whenever you watched a documentary on another band, that's the band they mentioned. It's like, oh yeah, King's X, we were big into them, so they became kind of like the musician's musician.
I heard a quote from Johnny Zazula, who signed into Megaforce, and said that he was listening to a demo of theirs, or maybe watching the video. I'm not sure, but he says, "I don't know how we're possibly going to market this, but I have to sign them."
Yeah, yeah. They were kind of that quirky band because they're like, well, what kind of music is it? And you just kind of like, at the time, you know,
And
well, it's not really metal. It's not rock. It's kind of its own. I mean, Out of the Silent Planet was just kind of its own thing. I mean, it had heavy guitars and sections, but it wasn't really a heavy album, you know. And then you add on top of that like the Beatlesque
that's what I was saying.
3-part harmonies on top of that.
They have the Beatles-esque thing and the groove, funky, blues-driven type of sound that nobody was doing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I put them up there with the Police and Rush and Cream were one of the great trios where everybody understands that we have to do more to pull our weight, otherwise it sounds small or hollow.
And the most amazing thing about that is that they sounded that way. They sounded just as good live as they did on album. I mean, up to a certain point now. I still think they sound good. Don't get me wrong, but if you go to hear King's X like here in the last couple of years, you know, they've dropped the tuning of some of the songs. The things you normally have to do as
with
people age because the vocal cords age.
I saw them. Were you at? I didn't see them this last round when they came around recently, but
me and you went to one King's X.
That's
me, you, my wife, and your wife, and
that's
remember Mike Lawrence was there.
Yeah, okay. So we went to the show. And Steve, my old manager from Guitar Center.
Yeah.
Was there. Okay, that was that gig.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask you, is if you were at that gig, because I couldn't remember. See, I can't even remember who I go to stuff with, who people I go with this anymore. But I thought they sounded great, and they performed great, and Doug sounded great that night.
And that's the thing. I mean, it's one of those things I hate to bring it up or even mention that because it sounds like what I'm saying is a negative thing, but
because I have nothing to base it on except
they sounded great that
video
night.
or because I never saw them.
Yeah, they sounded great that night. But now we get in a time machine and we backtrack to like 1990. I think it was 94, 93, 94. The first time I saw King's X live. They kind of blew themselves out of the water. I mean, they sound great now. But like if you listen to their newer versions of songs now, and you go back and listen to the regular album version, you can tell that the key has been altered a little bit, this, that, and other. But if you go back to 96 or 94 or 95, you couldn't tell the difference between what you were hearing live and what you heard on disc.
Now let me ask you this question. When you saw him back in the 90s, was Ty still playing the Gibson amps?
Yes, he was still playing the Lab. He's still playing the Lab series.
Yeah. What do you think that amp sound compared to the orange?
The CR120?
Yeah.
Look, I think the CR120 sounds really good. I think for a solid state amp, it's pretty impressive, especially when you hear it in context with King's X playing live. I don't think Ty is ever, though, going to have... There was just something about the conglomeration of unlikely gear that he put together.
Yeah.
You know, you had this Lab Series amp, which what I read is correct, I believe that the Lab Series amp was actually broken. I believe like one of the channels or something wasn't operating right. And that added to the tone that particular amp was able to get. But you add that Lab Series solid state amp, which no one uses. Not no one. Blues guys use solid state amps all the time, which is something that no one ever talks about. You know, Ty Tabor wasn't even the most famous person to use the Lab Series amps. B.B. King would even request those for live concerts when he could, if they didn't have a certain amp, he said, "Well, just give me the Lab Series amp." So blues guys had used solid state amps way before it caught on in the rock community because they play loud and clean. You know, the Rollin' Jazz, and jazz guys too, thus the popularity of the Rollin' Jazz Chorus, which is a very iconic amp, and I dare you to find too many people that said it doesn't sound good. But here you got a rock guy and you know, a genre of music that highly favors tube amplifiers. He's using a solid state amp. He's using a Fender Stratocaster that not very many people even knew existed, the Fender Elite, which had some sort of active preamp built into the guitar. You know, it didn't even have and it didn't have a toggle switch. It had push buttons for your for the pickups. And you know, even Ty will tell you when he first started using that whole setup, when he first started using that guitar, he wasn't even sure about the sound of it because he was coming from using Les Paul. And at first, the other band members in King's X weren't really that, you know, excited about it. But then at a point, it just caught on. Like he just refused to let this go. He's like, I can make this work. And then it got to a point where it was like he wanted to go back to his Les Paul and put the Strat down, and the whole band was like, "Oh no, man, that sounds good. That's our sound," you know. And I think that was the right choice because those first 4 albums, there's nothing like it tone wise. There's
What was
nothing
he
like
playing
it
when we
anywhere.
saw him that gig we were just talking about? Guitar.
Oh man, he played a bunch of stuff. That night he played. He had 2 Les Pauls.
Yeah, I thought, yeah.
And I can't remember if he played anything else or not. I remember he had the 2 Les Pauls. And I think the last video I saw, the most recent video that I saw of King's X Live, I think he was back to playing predominantly Strats again. But, you know, I think Ty Tabor's another one of those guys. You know, it's like the famous version of Chuck. It's like he can get his sound out of anything that he plays. He typically comes off sounding like Ty Tabor.
And I'm never been that guy, and I still, if I'm gonna, I don't like being thrown into a situation I can play, and I've never played the setup. I don't know what to expect. Is it set up right, the guitar? What the is happening? But if I can get some practice on it, I can pretty much, like you're saying, use anything. But you know, back in the day, I was never the guy that could take any amp and EQ it and sound right. I'd sound like because I'm using some setup I don't want to use.
Right.
You know, at somebody's house or, you know, whatever going on. So.
This probably doesn't add anything to the conversation, but it's just an amusing little anecdote about Ty, and you probably know that Yamaha was in development with him for a signature model, and while they were getting ready to put that in production, they sent him some things just to have out on the road.
AES.
Yeah, and you never saw him from the time that he had that model out in live shots and stuff with that signature model.
He played those AES. In fact, he got a couple of them. He got a couple of the AESs, and then in interviews, that's all he talked about. He was just in love with those guitars because that was during a time, that was back before Gibson was doing the weight relieving. So Yamaha made this guitar that was basically a more up-to-date version of a Les Paul with, and it was sleeker looking, much sleeker looking, but most importantly, it had weight relief in it. And Ty converted a lot of people to using those guitars there, because dropping their Les Pauls and going to those because they sounded beefy like a Les Paul, but you didn't have the weight. I honestly believe, which I don't have any stats behind me to back that up, but I honestly believe that was one of the things that finally pushed Gibson into doing the weight relief and stuff. Because Yamaha by far, I don't believe, was the first single. Woo, that's loud. I don't think they were the first single cut to do weight relief, but I think they were one of the at the time, one of the more popular ones that were doing it. Yamaha there for a minute had a pretty good run of instruments and amps. They were doing really good there for a minute. Now I think they pretty much kind of faded off into semi-obscurity now, but I mean they're still out there. You know, they just you just don't really hear much out of them anymore.
There was a time when they were aggressively trying to, you know, like get high-profile endorsers and putting a lot of money into advertising and development products. But you know, Yamaha, if you go to Japan, they do everything from like financial services to
Oh, yeah.
power tools and stuff like that. In
Motorcycles.
Yeah, motorcycles.
You know, vehicles. They had an amp. I had a Yamaha amp that was amazing. It was at one point Yamaha had done this joint collaboration with Soldano. It was the T100, T something 100. It's like this big thing. It basically, man, it was like a rectifier on crack. It
I
sounded
remember those.
great.
Yeah.
If I could get my hands on another one of those, I would in a heartbeat. That's one of those amps I wish I never sold.
Was it tube or solid state?
Completely tube, and it was a lot of glass in the back of that amp, man. Jeez, that would have been an expensive retube, but but I guess does anyone have any other person they want to throw up on the thing? I guess I'll give it to Matt because I think me and you have put like numerous guitarists on the list already as influential.
I would think it's sort of a not an obvious choice, but Alex Lifeson.
No, that's a good one. You know, I sometimes think I know no one's going to agree with this because like how could he be that in the band that he's in? But I feel like Alex Lifeson in that band, I felt like his contributions were exceedingly underrated.
Certainly.
Oh yeah.
I think he was so overshadowed by, you know, Geddy Lee and Neil Peart, and I think sometimes he didn't get as much of the accolades in that band as I thought maybe he should have got.
Kind of like Andy Summers in the Police.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a rhythm section like that and be in there just trying to play over top of them. Right. And I think Alex and Andy realized, well, my contribution is to make sure that I have the right tone, right texture, right chord, right arpeggiation or whatever, you know, to where they can do their thing and I'm not stepping on it. And in many ways, he is the aesthetic of that band.
Right.
You know, certainly I'm a bassist, I'm a drummer, and you know, they had one of the sickest rhythm sections in rock. Yeah. But without a guitarist with the kind of judiciousness and restraint that Alex Lifeson had, that band would not have worked on, you know, on paper or otherwise.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Well, I guess we can wrap this one up before this video turns into like a 6-hour event. Editing for the next 6 days. But anyway, this has been Gear in Review. I've been Gillen H2O and Chuck and Matt. And subscribe.